Hello, I'm very excited to be here today with Jean Case, who has been a philanthropist, impact investor, and thought leader for a long time, and is going to talk to us today about what she sees as most important in getting new investors and new producers of climate-friendly solutions to operate. And before I turn it over to our question and our conversation, I just want to mention that she is currently the chairman of the Board of Trustees of the National Geographic Society, the first woman in that post, and therefore has a particularly broad idea of what is happening to the environment. She is also the CEO of the Case Impact Network. So, Jean, welcome to the RockCreek Climate Summit. And I want to start off by talking to you about, or asking you about, your terrific book, Be Fearless, which I think could be a slogan for us all today, thinking about climate. I'm just going to hold it up so people can see. Be Fearless by Jean Case. And in that book, you, of course, recommend that we need to think about breakthrough technologies, breakthrough actions, really to transform the situation we're in now to the one we want to be in, where we're not suffering from these terrible climate events that are already upon us. We've been seeing today, we were chatting earlier about how here in Washington, D.C., on the East Coast of the United States, the weather is being affected, the air quality is being affected by the fires that are raging in the west of the United States. Also heard today about deathly floods in China, and of course, in recent weeks in Germany as well. So can you tell us what it takes to make a breakthrough?
Sure. Well, the Be Fearless work, and first of all, Caroline, it's a delight to be with you.
Thank you.
And big thanks to RockCreek for putting this summit together. I think it's really important. But Be Fearless was really based on some social science that we invested in to take a look through time and across sectors and across generations at what has led to transformational breakthroughs, real innovations that in some cases actually have created revolutions. And I think the title of this talk is From Crisis to Opportunity. And the idea of the book is, how do you sit in the middle of a crisis and really create breakthrough opportunities? So there are 5 principles. One of them is let urgency conquer fear. And I think one thing we've heard today time and time again is the real urgency that we're all feeling around climate change. And we call that the fierce urgency of now. And that can actually be a great recipe for getting people out of their comfort zones, helping them to take risks and really try new things.
That's terrific. Now, you're very familiar. I mentioned that you're the CEO of the Case Impact Network. You're very familiar with impact investing. Can you talk to us a little bit about how important that is and how investors themselves can contribute towards an environmentally friendly world? We know that there have been many investments, and our whole economies have not been very environmentally friendly, and that's something we need to change, and we need to use the power of business and finance, as our earlier panelists were talking about. Can you tell us how you see that from your position?
Sure. Well, impact investing has been around for a while as a focus area, somewhere in the neighborhood of like a decade. But actually, it's really quite exciting to see how interest and growth has occurred. I think this year we'll probably top $1 trillion in impact investing assets. But today, we also should really talk about ESG, not just impact investing. And there are some differences, as you know, Caroline. But I think what we're seeing is the influence of a significant demographic shift that's not just happening here in the United States, but around the world. And that is the influence of the next generation and women as they come into economic power specifically, and they are coming into significant economic power. There's a lot being talked about the tens of trillions, of money that will shift from one generation to the next. But even economic power in their jobs and the wealth they're creating for themselves. And so what we're seeing is that those two segments really were known as conscious consumers. And today what we're seeing is they're really driving a movement towards conscious investing, aligning your values with your investments or your investments with your values, and recognizing that you can get so much more from your capital than simply a financial return, and demanding it. And it's, there's so much tremendous momentum on both fronts.
Yeah, well, that's great. And here at RockCreek, as you know, Afsane, who co-founded the firm and is the CEO, has always been very interested in impact and in the environment. And of course, my children are millennials, and they certainly have been aware of the climate in a way, and the importance of acting in a way that I never was. They're not necessarily big investors yet, but it's great to think of them being leaders and being investors. What I'd like to turn to now, what are some of the specific opportunities that you see, and both in venture and in technology that can help this?
Well, super excited by it. And before I kick off on that, let me just say, we're so privileged at National Geographic. Afsane serves as our chair of our investment committee, so we couldn't really have a better mission forward, great, world leader in that role. And similarly with you, Caroline, and what you've done in your career. But the real opportunity that I see is a new generation of entrepreneurs and a new generation of investors that are really building great new companies where climate and sustainability is in the DNA at the founding. And, we could talk about a number of examples. There's one company that's been founded in all places, Appalachia. And it is really reinventing the way food is grown in the United States. It's a greenhouse focus, so they use 90% less water in, their quote-unquote agriculture, 3 times the yield in the same acreage. They are less than a day's drive to 80% of the U.S. population. Why does that matter? Think about the carbon footprint. They're not getting on boats. They're not getting on, big trucks across the nation. So much of our population lives along the corridor where they have their greenhouses. And of course, what are they doing? They're doing that in a place in America that was coal country. So those kind of and they've just gone public, AppHarvest is the name of it. Those kind of next generation companies, by the way, don't just offer products, they're also really bringing a mission focus. So they're in schools, and they're really trying to change people's perception of what it means to grow food in a sustainable way.
Right, and I love that, because agriculture is so important, and we were talking about the fires in California, and of course the drought there is affecting the harvests there. And as Senator Markey was talking about early this morning in this summit, it's very important for new jobs, and new agriculture is part of that, to be in areas that are seeing some of the old fossil fuel heavy means of support going away, or need to be seeing it going away, but can often be forgotten. So the fact that it's in Appalachia is another plus.
And another brand known to many people and truly beloved by many, particularly next gen, is Sweetgreen. And Sweetgreen announced in the last month that they're set to IPO as well. The cool thing about Sweetgreen is, they were 3 college guys at Georgetown who just asked a simple question: how come we can't get healthy food? And why aren't people thinking about our planet? So when you go on to this food website, right? I mean, it's at the end of the day, it really provides food. So you're going to get your lunch or whatever. You're going to see a bold statement that says, we believe climate change is the most pressing challenge of our time. Now, what fast food places are you going to go on and find that to be a bold statement right at the top of the website? And they have just integrated that thinking in everything that they've done. So their sustainability, really from the get-go, again, in the DNA of their founding, through where they are today, where they have over 150 Sweetgreens around the nation. It's really impressive to see. But again, a next-generation company brought to us by next-generation founders.
I love that. One of my daughters is a great aficionado of Sweetgreen, and started off early, trying to persuade me to get my lunch at Sweetgreen. So,
well, though, Caroline, what I would say about these kind of companies is, and Sweetgreen's a great example. You aren't a Sweetgreen customer. It's almost like you're a Sweetgreen member of the tribe. They have the Sweet Green Festival. It's a way of life. There's an ethos that, and every business desires to have their customers self-identify as one of them, and they've pulled that off.
Yeah, no, so that's terrific. I mean, it brings together some of both the investing side and also the business side, and then the consumer side.
Right.
So I want to switch a little bit and talk about National Geographic.
Yeah, let's do it.
You're the chairman of the board of trustees.
I am.
And so you see across a broad range of environmental issues what needs to be prioritized, what is being prioritized, and what do you see as the key environmental issues? What are the concerns at the forefront of your mind, and how can we best address them?
Yeah, well, we've been significantly focused on climate and conservation since our founding 133 years ago. But I think one thing that has shifted in recent years, which I'm very excited by, is a real focus on impact, real impact that can be measured. So, for instance, we have something known as the Pristine Seas Initiative, in which we've worked with countries all over the world to set aside new marine protected areas. It's been so successful to date. There have been 23 new ones established, representing over 6 million square kilometers of ocean. And this is so exciting. And then, we were already really jazzed by that work and feeling great about the impact and the momentum there. And then the team did some new science looking at the ocean floor and recently published an article that revealed that there is much more carbon sequestered in the ocean floor than we had ever believed, which now, when you consider that so much of what's happening in the ocean is this deep trawling, which is, disrupting the ocean floor, by creating marine protected areas, we can keep that carbon where it belongs, which is on the ocean floor.
That's a very scary thought, that there is, we're all thinking about how to reduce how much carbon we're
and we don't want to be putting it out into our water and our atmosphere.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mentioned you were the first woman to hold the position of chairman of the board of trustees at the National Geographic Society. So, of course, I believe in the research that RockCreek and IFC produced, which showed that, for example, amongst investments, a more diverse management and team leads to better outcomes. And I certainly believe in the importance of diversity for many different reasons, including efficiency, good decision making, and so on. But how do you find being a woman in your role? Does it present an extra hurdle for you when you're trying to have people take these concerns very seriously? Or on the contrary, do you find that people are readier to listen, or that it's easier to get this board of grandees to pay attention?
Well, first of all, I want to give a big shout out to the National Geographic Society, because a lot of people aren't aware that it was over 100 years ago when we had the first female board member. We are still fighting in 2021 to convince companies they need one female. At National Geographic, our first female board member was over 100 years ago, and she was a remarkable woman, explorer, photographer, writer, and editor as well. So there is and remember, we funded Jane Goodall's work in 1961 and featured her work, prominently in the then media of the day, which was television. So we have continued to invest, and I've been very excited as chairman because we do this thing where we bring our explorers home once a year. We call it our base camp at headquarters. And it's always a great time to listen to them about their work out in the field. And when I became chair, that year we had 80% men as explorers. And we said, well, how, and most of the explorers were from the US. And we said, well, how can we really begin to make our explorer class really reflect our world? And I'm really proud to say that today, 51% of our explorers are female.
Fantastic.
And dozens of countries are represented in our explorer class. So if we want to do something in Africa, we're doing it with African explorers. They are doing the research and telling the stories. And we think it's just really the right way to go about sort of the next generation and the next 133 years of science and exploration.
That's fantastic. And of course, early on in those next 133 years, we're going to be getting to net zero. So I want to ask about, you've talked about in other fora redefining capitalism, and others today have talked about the need to change how at least goods are produced and how we think about the rewards of society. How do you do that?
Yeah. So the bottom line is, I'm a capitalist through and through, right? I grew up in the tech sector. That's where I spent most of my career, early days of AOL, and helping to build the internet revolution. But I will say this, it couldn't be any more obvious that we need capitalism to work for more people in more places. We just do. And guess what? We're capable of that. It's always impossible until it gets done, and we can get this done. And specifically, I think with a focus on race, place, and gender, we can bring more people into capitalism, which, by the way, is not even just a social justice thing. It's smart innovation, because when you bring people together with different backgrounds and different perspectives, they're going to see opportunities that, maybe the privileged sitting in Silicon Valley won't. Okay, and we see this time and time again with new companies being founded by people who have lived different experiences. So we need more of that. And we need more people enjoying the fruits of capitalism that have really built this nation and built our economic system. And it's not too late, in my opinion. We have a long way to go, though. Last year, 75% of venture capital went to just 3 places: New York, Massachusetts, and California. Only 2% of venture capital went to women-only led firms, and less than 1% to African-American founders. Think about that. It's 2021. 98% of the capital is going to men, 99% to those that aren't Black. It just doesn't work. So we need to really, and I'm super encouraged by what we're seeing across the country in terms of, efforts to shine a light on the innovation, shine a light on the talent, so that we begin to see capital disperse in new ways to fund new companies.
Yeah, so how do you think, what is the best way to encourage people to take risks? I mean, just one anecdote is that there's been a big effort amongst the G7 to promote investment in women. But I've spoken to some of the development finance institutions, the DFIs, and they find it quite difficult to marry that overall goal with their usual risk calculations that require people to have been in business for a long time and
no
so
question.
on. So one of the issues that we have is how do you get over the hurdle of the normal risk metrics?
Yeah.
And I guess that is a little bit to do with what your book is about. But we all need to be we need to kind of change things and get the momentum moving. And my sense is that, and the data that you've just given is really bears out, that we haven't really got that move going yet.
Yeah, we are at the beginning of that, and you're so right. A great advisory will tell you, first-time fund manager, there's real risk there. But when you look at particularly people of color and women that are starting funds today, for most of them, it's a first-time fund, right? And that is, systemic in some ways, in that they didn't get the same leadership opportunities in their financial ladder, et cetera. I am seeing it change. I'm seeing a class of investors emerge that are willing to take those risks. And particularly, I would say in the last year, the amount of capital that has been committed. Look at Goldman. $10 billion of new capital towards Black women-owned firms. Okay, that's investment capital. That's not philanthropy. So we are starting to see at scale some really significant commitments that could shift things. But it does need to be married with a real commitment on the part of those investing in the broader ecosystem to make sure that we're bringing, everyone along in the same way that their counterparts got brought along and they didn't have those opportunities.
Right. And going back to what you were talking about, the new investors, and many of them may be more interested in ESG, and they may tend to pay more attention to ESG.
Yeah.
How do you see them sort of taking a leadership role, or will they just have to sort of grow into that and we hope not grow out of the idealism that is powering in them at the moment?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because in my own background in the internet revolution, I worked for the first, what was called an online service in the US, and then GE recruited me to build one for them. And it didn't take me very long to realize that the big established companies companies are not going to drive this revolution.
Yeah.
So then I got a call from the startup, which became AOL, and I jumped. I think similar things are happening here. I think it will be very hard for big establishment to really change things. I think in the same way we're seeing new companies form that look very different, have very different DNA, I think it's going to take those kind of revolutions taking shape from the next generation to really bring about change. And you know what? One way that big establishment, and we're seeing this with banks almost every day, with acquisitions, right? And who are they acquiring? They're acquiring these next generation, new thinking kind of firms to guide them. But with ESG, the data is really clear. It's grown, inflows into ESG has grown 10x in 2 years, 10x. The momentum is really strong, and now we need clear measurement and clear standards to bring integrity to that kind of growth.
Yes, it's interesting you mentioned about the integrity and standards at the panel that we just had with the climate action people, Nigel Topping and Gonzalez. Nigel was saying, he talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly are the greenwashing and what he gave the initials, so it was a little bit more polite, BS. But do you
Good for him. A little of that needs to be said. I mean, I just had a piece in Barron's last month in which I said, buyer beware if you're going under the banner of, if you're investing in ESG. Some of it's real, some of it's not. And unfortunately today, I think it's the burden of the investor or the advisor to really vet for that.
Yeah, and for the investor, for the advisor, they need to get smart about it.
Yeah.
For the investor, they need to be smart about their advisors and also listen to others. Is there a role for others to explain what is good and what isn't, or is it just too hard to define?
It's not too hard, and in fact, we've taken this to heart in a really big way. So right now, it is not public. We are just in test mode, but we have a newsletter specifically targeted at Next Gen and women who really feel that they want to invest with their values, and it's really trying to simplify. And by the way, it's not just women in Next Gen that need it simplified. I mean, the most sophisticated person out there says, I don't understand. What's ESG? What does it mean? How do I do it? What should I be looking for? So I think we need, to talk in lay people terms, make it simple with frameworks people can understand, and hopefully have enough data that standards can begin to emerge.
Right. And I want to talk a little bit about your role as the CEO of the Case Impact Network, because I know that you've been tasked by the policy world to help out a bit then. So can you tell us about how that has worked out? Sure.
Well, I think we're seeing so much change on the policy front. It's been a theme here, I think. But even what's happening with the SEC, where they're seriously asking the question and they've, put out requests for comments, what kind of things have to be real if somebody is saying they're offering an ESG product, for instance, for investment? We are seeing policy development on several fronts. In my particular situation, I served on the U.S. task force to the G7 on impact investing. And there, it was a really important moment because we looked at what policy conditions needed to exist in the U.S. to drive the momentum of impact investing. And after we issued the report at the White House, it wasn't long after that most of those policy recommendations were adopted. But more importantly, it galvanized that day $2 billion in new impact investing commitments. So, policy can play a really important role in galvanizing people to action. It's not well understood because people think of it as a stick, but it can also be a carrot.
Right, and that $2 billion came in just as a result of the publicity and of the...
A lot of work on our part to make sure we had $2 billion that were committed on the day we issued the report. But we got it. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Familiar with that kind of work. Yes, you want the announcement to...
Yeah, sure, to have
out.
teeth.
Yeah. No, that's terrific. So tell me also about how you see the young people that are coming into maybe more of a transfer of wealth from their parents, and presumably that will just be a bigger issue going forward.
Yeah. So my husband and I are members of the Giving Pledge, and one of the most active Giving Pledge groups is Next Generation. And I've had the privilege of working with them, even though I'm very clearly not the next generation. And they are just like so many others. They don't see the world the way their parents have seen it. They don't see using capital in the same way, whether that capital is investment or philanthropy. I referenced this earlier in the talk, but I was teaching at Yale School of Management, and some kid said, I just never understood why all you asked of capital was a financial return when it can do so much more. And it can, and I think the next generation realizes the powerful tool it can be, no matter how it's used as a consumer or an investor or a philanthropist. And I'm very excited by it because I think they are really shining a light to a better future in terms of how we use capital.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, my children, I think actually our children may have gone to the same school together at some point. We can chat about that a bit afterwards. But they certainly have that idealism. And we know that the Gen Z and millennials care about climate change, but so also, of course, do some of those of us, I'll speak for myself, in the baby boomer generation. And it's important also to think about how pension funds and other institutional investors can shift money to support this kind of this kind of impact investing. Does that seem just like a much harder reach than?
I don't think so. I mean, first of all, CEOs at every company want to attract and retain the best and the brightest, and the largest workforce in our history is millennials today. So they can't be, deaf, dumb, and blind to what they're hearing from the generation. And I think it's played a huge role in how we've seen corporate cultures adapt somewhat. Some of it's real, some of it's talk, but I do believe a lot of it is real. I just think that they are redefining sort of the rules on so many fronts. And Caroline, we did a 10-year study of millennials and their perceptions on social good. We saw very early that this generation looked at the world very differently than the generations before it. And you talked about idealism. Look, all young people are idealistic. The difference between these next generations is they early on turn their idealism into real action. And I think that's going to stay with them through their lives, and I think it's going to benefit all of us.
That's terrific. They may not thank us so much for what we have done and left for
And who could blame them, all right?
But let's hope that we can pass on something. I mean, they will take what we're giving them and turn it into something better. Before I let you go, Jean, I want to talk a little bit about how you think we can pull together the sort of policy world, the business world, and the investing world, and use some of that energy to make change. Is it primarily through investing and so on, or is it also through, encouraging innovation, encouraging education? Senator Markey this morning talked about training. Should we all just be thinking of how to do it in our bit of the world? You've expanded your reach on the world, but what would be your message to everybody?
Sure. Well, one thing is true. No matter where I've traveled in my business travel, my personal travel, or with National Geographic, to the most remote villages, to the biggest cities around the world, everywhere I go, people have great ideas about how to make a better world, whether that's their village, their region, their country, the world. Be Fearless was written as a clarion call because we all feel a sense of this needs to change. Somebody should do something about that. And we all need to be that somebody, really, where we see opportunities, where we see small ways we can make a difference, where we see really big radical ideas. We need to use this time to feel that sense of urgency and, to really take action in ways that we can, take it forward, take some risks, make a difference.
Right. Well, we're hoping, Senator Markey also talked earlier about some action that we're hoping might take place up on Capitol Hill, although it's not where things happen always in the smoothest possible manner. But we will certainly be looking for where we can each be doing something And we at RockCreek, of course, are very happy to be hosting this summit today, and that's a little piece that we can do today. We also, of course, think about our investments, and we can be inspired by you and others who are expanding the reach through your various roles. And thank you very much, Jean. I don't know if I think you've kind of given a last message to everybody. Do what you can.
It's time to be fearless.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Caroline, and big thanks to RockCreek and Afsani as well.
Right. Thank you so much.